Yes. So, welcome to the third Ask the Experts. Tonight we're going to be talking about electric vehicles in general, so electric vehicles and electric bikes. First off, a very brief introduction about Marlow Energy Group. If it would move on, there we go. So Marlow Energy Group was formed in January this year. Community benefit society aiming to, well, the objective which I'm about to talk about, being as a hell of a lot of change is required to make environmental changes to get to a zero carbon, and as the government needs to lead on this, some people might think they're not doing a great job at the moment. They have some policies, but we've yet to see things really starting to bite in a proper plan. But yeah, the objectives of Marlow Energy Group is to be a local initiator and of change, and a source for people to come to talk about what sort of things are required. So our main objectives are, first off, make Marlow a net zero carbon town. And anything that's required to do that by knowledge sharing, building networks and collaboration with other people. I mean, a lot of things about climate change is that people are just not aware of either the situation that we are all in, or some of the things that need to be done to get us to net zero. So knowledge sharing. And the other thing is to try and develop some projects, some renewable energy projects, and find some investment where appropriate to stimulate these projects, which could be photovoltaic panels, could be heat pumps, and to support, in doing so, to give the opportunity for local people to invest in local projects by community share ownership schemes, and also to try and stimulate local businesses to get involved in putting projects on the ground. There's going to be a big shortage of people who are qualified to, say, install heat pumps, for instance, in the near future, and therefore it'd be great if we could get some skilled people into Marlow to get us at the forefront of that. So those are our objectives. We're always keen for volunteers and new people. Even from Marlow Rotary Clubs, it would be really great if they could be part of the Marlow Energy Group as well. So please consider joining us or donating to help us what we're doing, and take a look at our website there. So with that, I think I shall stop sharing my screen, John. And if you can hand over to, I think it's Andy who's going next, I think you said.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you for inviting me along. John is very persuasive. And he said, all I need for is 5 minutes, Andy, just to answer some questions. And then he said on Monday, it's 15 minutes, so I'm just going to speak 3 times slower than I was before. So electric bikes have grown. I've been running the shop for 30 years, and we've been selling electric bikes for probably sort of 12 or 13 years. But it has only been in the last 5 years that they've really taken off. The reason being the reliability has increased massively. The motors have become much smaller and much more reliable, and the battery technology has improved to give much longer run time. And to give you an idea, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we might have sold 2 or 3 electric bikes a year. Now electric bikes are our biggest category within the shop. So we sell in financial terms more electric bikes than any other type of bike. And I would imagine within 3 or 4 years, I think electric bikes will make up half of all of our sales. So it's something that's growing rapidly all the time. People buy electric bikes for various reasons. They buy them for leisure. And so they're buying, a mountain bike or a bike to just go for a ride out in the countryside. It extends their range massively. So people that were maybe struggling to find the time to ride 10 or 15 miles now go 30, 40 miles on a ride, and it opens up a much greater amount of the countryside. So people will generally ride the Hamilton Loop and do the Turvilles, Finges. Now they're going beyond the ridge and going beyond sort of Watlington and the Vale of Aylesbury. So they're extending their range. And then, of course, electric bikes are fantastic for people who are losing strength, if you like, if they're getting older, or they don't feel that they've quite got the energy they used to have. So it's opening up cycling to a much more older dynamic. And then, of course, electric bikes are being used for transport, getting people to work and shopping. Obviously, you can load up an electric bike to a much greater extent. So they're being bought for various reasons. So what I thought would be useful is just to answer some of the questions that we get asked the most, really, when people come into the shop. So I've got a couple of graphics that demonstrate maybe some of the most common questions, and then I've got some pictures of all of the various electric styles of bikes that you can buy, all of which we sell in the shop, to give you an idea of the range and scope of electric bikes that are out there now. Now, I've got a couple of images I want to share. I've got my daughter with me here to help me. I'm just going to see if I can do it. I'm going to press the word share, and then do I do it from desktop or application?
Desktop.
No, it's not. Do I do enter your share screen? Let me press that and see what happens. No, sorry, I'm going to try another one. So, what's that? Oh, there we are. We're on it. We're on it. Okay. Right, and then if I want to present that, it makes it big, doesn't it? Right, can you see that?
Yes.
Right, okay. So there we are. Somebody at the shop's done this for me. I'm not very IT relevant. So we go to the first image, and this is a very, very common question we get asked. People come into the shop and say, "Flippin' heck, £2,000. I'm not paying £2,000 for electric bike. I've seen them back of the paper for £1,000, or I've seen them here for £1,000." And so this is really just an explanation of why you maybe want to spend a little bit more on an electric bike and what you get for that. So the bicycle to the left is a bike that you see very, very commonly on the back of all the newspapers. That's actually a model called a G-Tech, which is widely advertised. The first difference is the battery on this bicycle will be a sort of 200 watt-hour battery, which would give you, best case scenario, maybe a 30-mile range. The one on the right rather, is a very a trek bike that we sold a couple of years ago. Anyway, it's an older model now. They've improved it now, but it gives a good comparison. Classic battery of say 400 watt hours. That will give you a range of about 60 miles. Now, the thing to remember about a smaller battery and with a smaller range, you're then charging it more often. So if you're charging your battery every 2 or 3 days, that battery is going to get depleted, because all batteries have a certain amount of life and ability to be recharged. So if a battery is bigger and has got more watt hours, then essentially it will not only last longer in miles ridden, but also last longer in the life of the battery. So the bike on the left, it widely advertises itself as having no gears. Now, for simplicity. So that sounds great, but what that means in reality is that when you are riding it, you're putting more strain on the motor, so you're adding extra power all the time to compensate for not having any gears. Whereas on an electric bike, you really need gears. You don't need a load of gears. You generally will have maybe 9 or 10 gears at the back. But what that will give you is the ability to not put the motor and the battery under strain. So you find the gear that is right to be riding, thus needing less power, essentially. The bike on the left, it says motor in the front wheel. It's actually got a motor in the back wheel. But they generally have hub-driven motors, whereas the bike on the right, the motors are built into the crank of the bike. So the motor itself is all part of the transmission of the bicycle. Now that has two main advantages. The feel of the power transfer is much better. So as you put pressure down on the cranks, the motor will immediately pick up how much effort you're putting through and replicate that depending on what level of assistance you're giving it. Not only that, but then the weight of the bicycle is in the center of the bike and low down on the bike, and that gives you a better center of gravity. Essentially, the bike will handle and ride with a greater degree of balance and ride better. So to have a motor that is in the cranks, it's a much better ride quality. Again, the bike on the left, you'll have a 2-year warranty on the battery and the frame, whereas the bike on the right, you will have a lifetime warranty on the frame, and again, a 2-year warranty or 500 charges on the battery and motor. And in essence, the kind of warranty you get from Bosch, which is the vast majority of all the electric bikes we sell, have a Bosch motor system. The warranties are very good, and we have a very good relationship with Bosch, and we're even able to warranty batteries and motors outside that warranty period if we feel it's fair to do that. Again, the bike on the left, you've got very, very basic levels of equipment. So very, very basic brakes, very, very basic frame, cabling, whereas the bike on the right is actually a decent quality bike that has been electrified. So to give you an idea, the bike on the left, if you remove the electric function from it, it's probably a £200 bicycle, whereas the bike on the right, it's probably a £700-800 bicycle. And then once you add on the motor and the battery, that's where you get the bigger price. Probably the most important thing when you consider buying any bicycle, especially if you want to have some sort of green credentials, is you want to keep that electric bicycle on the road for many, many years. And the serviceability of that bike is really the most important thing. And if you are not absolutely confident, you can take that bicycle back to where you bought it from, or the manufacturer, and have it continually fixed and maintained. Then it's got no sort of green credentials. Whereas the bikes that we sell, we are very, very confident they can still be on the road in 10 years' time. So again, we have a very good relationship with all of the manufacturers of the motor systems that we use. We have all of our staff trained in doing it, and it's really in our interest to try and keep those bikes on the road. So that's really important when you buy an electric bike, that you need to buy it from somewhere that you feel confident that you can take it back, have it serviced, and there's got some form of longevity in that bicycle. And plus the bike on the right has got lots of other things like the mud guards, the lights built in as well, etc., etc., etc. So I hope that gives you some idea of the differences between some of the cheaper bikes you see on the market, and then better quality ones. So I'll just go through now a few different sorts of bicycles, and we'll talk you through. I'll talk you through some features on those bicycles. So if we go to the next screen. At the top here, we have a couple of mountain bikes, a mountain bike to the left and a mountain bike to the right. Classic mountain bike, good quality mountain bike. As you see with these bicycles, the batteries themselves are hidden inside the frame. So that serves two purposes, really. Primarily, it's cosmetic. It's a good look, and the bikes themselves, at the first glance, don't even look electric because they are very, very cleverly hidden within the frame. And secondly, by having the battery again to the center of the bike, it all helps with the center of gravity and the handling of that bike. And you will look there, there's a bike there at sort of 2,650, and then there's one there at £5,000. apart from the bikes themselves, the bike on to the right is a very high level bicycle, and it's the sort of bicycle you'd maybe pay £3,500 for, even if it wasn't electrified. But within the ranges of bikes, there's different systems as well, and again, watt hours of batteries. So the battery on the bike on the left is a 500 watt hour battery, and you would expect a range of really 60 or 70 miles out of that with kind of average usage. And then the bike on the right, then that goes up to 625 watt hour of battery, and very, very commonly people are getting maybe 80 miles out of a charge without too much trouble. You've also got different levels of motor as well. So Bosch themselves do a wide variety of motors, and they're getting smaller and smaller all the time. So they launched a motor last year that was a third smaller and a third lighter than the previous generation. So they're getting much smaller all the time. Going down to the next two bikes, these are really probably the most popular bikes that we sell, which are hybrid electric bikes. Both quite similar bikes. The one on the left has a battery that is mounted within the frame and a slightly smaller wheel, so suited to somebody who maybe wants to do a mix of.
Andy, you've muted yourself.
I can't hear.
Andy, we can't hear you.
Okay, so when did I stop? When did I mute myself?
About a minute ago.
Okay, so where did I get to?
So you got to the multiple pictures.
Okay, so I'll start again from the multiple pictures. Can you hear me now?
No, you'd done the mountain bikes. We hadn't heard about the hybrids, though.
Okay, fine. We're on the hybrids. Okay, so we're looking at the hybrids now, and these are probably the most popular bikes that we sell. Very flexible bikes, allow you to do a wide variety of things. So the bike on the left at 2650, that again has got a battery that is mounted quite centrally on the down tube. That has got a slightly fatter tyre, so for people that want to do a little bit of river path, but really flexible bike, bit of river, bit of road. You've got, again, racks, mud guards, lights, and you've also, very often on these bikes, have integral locks as well, so they're kind of ready to roll, these bikes. So that one, 2650. The bike on the right is actually probably our most popular model that we sell. One, because the price is very nice, but it's a really, really practical bike because it saves the money by having the battery mounted on the rack. So when you mount batteries that are hidden within the frame or down on the down tube, it adds cost. This saves a bit of money by having the battery on a rack, but still very, very practical. The battery just slides out when you want to recharge it, or you plug the actual bike in the garage or whatever you wanted to do to recharge it. No step through, which is very useful. This one also has a hub gear, which is very, very practical, hassle-free. You never have to, the gears never go out of adjustment. You can change gear when it's stationary. So a really practical bike. An example of that is that bike that we're showing you there at 1975 is actually the Benelux countries' most popular bike. So Holland, Germany, Belgium is the most popular bike that you can buy in Holland. It's called a District, and it's extremely practical. So going down to the next screen. Okay, you can also buy racing bikes, road bikes with electric power as well, and these use a slightly different system, and the power that it delivers is much smaller and more measured, and you have a very, very small motor and slightly smaller battery. And what it does is it keeps the bike relatively light. You don't have as much a range, and it doesn't deliver as much power, but it's much, much more subtle. And you have the option with these bikes as well of removing the motor and removing the battery and turning it back into a normal bike if you didn't want to have that electrification. That's quite an interesting bike. The bike to the right is a model that we've just taken on. Again, covers a different sort of market. This is a folding electric bike, which obviously has a lot of uses for caravans, for taking it in the car, etc., boats. Again, this one with a really nice design where the battery is hidden in the frame. Actually designed by one of the McLaren designers, this one. So slightly less range, but very, very clever design. Again, all the bikes that you see here are all available for test ride. So you can come in and try any bikes that you want. Obviously, trying an electric bike is an important thing. Going to the bottom left, we have an electric trike, three-wheel trike. It's one I ride myself. So I've done many, many miles on these trikes. The beauty of having electric bikes and having so many different sorts of bikes that you can electrify, again, it opens up cycling to a much, much larger market. It opens it up to disabled people, people with injuries, and people when they get older or with balance issues. So having that option of having an electric bike just means that people can keep cycling into a great age. And this is something that anybody that if you travel to Holland or Belgium, you will notice that the amount of older people that are riding electric bikes is enormous. So people carry on riding bikes into their 80s, very, very common in Holland. If you look to the bike to the bottom right, this is an electric cargo bike. This is quite exciting because we've just committed to buying one of these, and this is something that is growing hugely, especially in London and in cities, for people to transport whatever they want. So businesses to transport goods, families to transport children, and it just allows, there's lots of talk of, grocery deliveries, etc., with cargo bikes. So you can carry a huge amount of weight in them. What we're going to do with the cargo bike that we've got coming in the next couple of weeks, we're going to make it available to anybody who wants to try it. So obviously nobody's going to sort of say, I'm going to buy a cargo bike without trying one and really seeing if it is going to fit into their lifestyle. And we want as many people to use an electric cargo bike as possible. So we're going to say to people, okay, if you want to try taking the kids to school, just take it for a couple of days, see how you get on. If you're a business that wants to do some deliveries for a couple of days, take it and use it. If you're somebody on Globe Park and you can see a use for it, use it. So we're hoping to get some publicity from that, and we're hoping to get it out as much as possible. It won't do any good if it's just sort of sitting there, gathering dust. So we want it out in the streets of Marlow. There is already a cargo bike in Marlow, you may have seen. I would love to see, within a year or so, 7 or 8 cargo bikes making journeys in Marlow, and just getting people to sort of think maybe we don't need to use the car for all these shopping trips. And if you have the space, a cargo bike is an absolutely brilliant solution for many, many people. So I hope that's given you a little bit of a rundown of electric bikes, but obviously I'm here to answer your questions, and I'm sure you have some questions, but I think that's probably it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
We'll move on rapidly to Gareth, and we'll take questions at the end. As I have said to people beforehand, put your questions on chat, the bottom middle button, and then we'll take them at the end. So over to you, Gareth, who will be talking about electric cars.
Right, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Been interested in the group for a while, but I just don't have time to really get involved in anything. It's something always seems to get in the way. Now, I wanted to kick off by saying something perhaps a little controversial in such a group. Electric cars are not zero emission. They're not going to save the planet. There's a number of areas where you cannot get it down to zero emission. There's the manufacturer, of course, the production of fuel. A lot of power, of course, is not zero emission at this point in time. Tire wear, particles, brake dust. There's research going into improvements on that, but obviously these things take time. So they're not going to solve all our problems. And they're part of a mix of wider solutions. We do walking, cycling. Thanks, Andy, for your section. There's ride sharing and public transport. It's going to be one thing in the wider mix. But I just wanted to go through some of the objections that regularly come up time and time again to why people can't do electric cars. So I often hear the "it's not zero emissions" argument from people who just want to stand their ground and defend what they've currently got. Answering with "no, of course it's not" seems to stop them in their tracks somehow. There's not enough chargers. Now, there are actually more electric car chargers in the UK than there are petrol stations. Just in Marlow, there are 5 chargers that I'm aware of. Now, they come in 3 main speeds. You've got the rapid chargers that you might use on something like a motorway service station. Charge up quickly, get you on your way. Typically, they run at 50 kilowatts. They'll charge the average electric car to 80% in about half an hour, 30 minutes, like that. 7 kilowatt chargers, which is the sort of thing that most people will have at home. They will charge a car up in 5 hours or so. And 3 kilowatt chargers, which are a plug it in, leave it overnight sort of scenario. They'll trickle charge quite slowly on those. So Marlow has 3 of the 3 kilowatt chargers, which I believe are located on lampposts. So the sort of thing that you might use if you can't get the car in a driveway. You just park it up in the street, plug it in, and leave it there for the night. There's 1 7 kilowatt on the business estate, the Globe Park, and 1 rapid charger. Wickham's slightly better serviced. It's got 6 of the rapid chargers, 5 of the 7 kilowatts in nations you want to visit, like the train station, car park, park and ride, retail park. And there's 2 of the roadside. Nationally, there's 34,000. There's across 19,500 devices in over 12,000 locations. So we're quite well catered for as far as chargers are concerned, despite the urban myth that they're not there. I think the problem is it's much easier to drive past a charger and not realise that it's there than it is to drive past a petrol station and not see it. Coming up later this year, next month actually, there's a new brand of charger being released. It's the company's called GridServe, and they're going to be releasing like a motorway service station, but purely for electric cars. The first one's opening in Braintree, and it will charge 30 cars simultaneously. You've got massive capacity there to get people charged up and move on their way to where they need to go. Really, where your charge is not. It takes too long to charge. Now, I do know of somebody who replies to that statement with, when somebody says, "How long does it take you to charge?" He says, 30 seconds. And immediately people will respond with, "What?" A slightly smug answer, I think. But the point is, I drive to where I'm going, I get out of my car, I get the cable out of the boot, and I plug it in. And then I leave and do something else. I don't care how long it takes, because I'm shopping or eating or sleeping. But as I said, typically it takes between 20 minutes and 11 hours, depending on what kind of charger you've got. the benefits, though, you need to change the way you think about filling up your car. It takes longer, but the point is that you wake up every morning and your car is full. You go to work and it fills up while you're working. I personally charge up at work. I actually don't pay for it. It's a perk of the job. I just do my charging throughout the whole of the weekdays at work, and I leave work at the end of every day with a full tank, for a better word. It really, you have to stop worrying so much about where, how long it takes to charge, and you just take advantage of it every step.
Okay.
Day, really. You'll do it at work, you'll do it when you're shopping, you'll do it when you get home. They cost too much. Now, really, you only need to buy as much car as you need to use. If you're driving around London, there's no point in having a car with a 500-mile range, because you're not going to do that in a day. You can get an electric car for as little as £1,700 on the second-hand market. That will get you a G-Wiz slow car, and it only does about 30 miles on a charge. So for London, that's ideal. The start for the Nissan Leaf is £4,495. That would typically get you about 80 miles on something like that, like my car does. My car has travelled nearly 45,000 miles in the time I've owned it, over 2 years. Works out at a total cost of £7,561. Works out at 16.8 pence per mile. That includes all costs. That's insurance, tyres, servicing, fueling up, every cost on the car, £7,500. If you take out the actual purchase cost of the car, it reduces it down to 8.7. And most of that is only because I've been primarily charging in public charging points, paying a higher fee for that. I can't charge at home. Now that I can charge at work, that cost is coming down every month. Typically, you'd expect just fuel cost on its own with about 2.5 pence a mile, something like that. You can only do local journeys in them. That is certainly not true. My car, as I said, it's got about an 85-mile range. I've travelled all around the country on that. So I've got a 40-mile round trip to work, so that range is perfectly within my needs week in, week out. But I've travelled to Bristol, Southampton, Telford, Malpas, which is where I spent the first few years of my life. And if you look that up on Zap Map, like Google Maps for charging points, you'll notice that that whole area is allergic to car chargers. They just don't exist. Absolute dead spot. And I was able to get there with relative ease recently. Meant an extra stop in my journey to make sure I was fueled up before I went into the dead zone. But for 2 years, I've never run out, and I've never been afraid to go as far as I need. If a car with an 85-mile range can do all of that, if you buy a more modern car, because mine's getting quite old now, if you buy something like a Kia Niro, which has got 300-odd mile range, there is nowhere in the country that you can't go. Basically, my car is at the lower end of the second-hand market. I've got a Nissan Leaf, one of the 20-kilowatt ones, the early ones. They're, as I said, they're becoming affordable now. For about £4,500 is the starting price on those. But the newer cars that are coming in with the ranges that are going to be up to 500 miles in the next year or two, they're going to start hitting the second-hand market quite soon. And I think that's when things are going to get very interesting, because we're going to have a whole plethora of cars that will do 150, 200 miles on a charge that are within reach of probably most people. But for me, cost was my main motivation for moving over to electric. It actually, sad to say, it wasn't environmental issues that got me involved. It was the fact that I could save money by running a car like this. But what I found is that it infects your life quite quickly. You start off thinking about the money, and then you start thinking about how you drive and how can I get more out of this? How can I save more? And then you start thinking about other things that you're doing that aren't in line with this car, and you start thinking about, well, could I be using more renewable fuel at home? Could I be recycling more? It all starts to sort of bleed into other areas. You take an interest in more environmental stuff once you've got it. It really is a force for good. That is the bulk of what I've got put down. I'm not sure if I'm running short or long or anything.
No, that's fine, Gareth. Much appreciated. I'm going to pass over to Robin now, who will go through the questions on the chat, which will be either for Andy or Gareth as appropriate.
Yeah, Gareth, can I just pursue you a little bit? The amount of chargers, I mean, what people need if they're going to charge on a motorway is a rapid charger. So Tesla have their own system.
Yeah.
So you can't charge a Tesla on anything but a Tesla supercharger. And they're dotted along the motorways, but they're few and far between once you get off the motorway.
Sorry, you can charge Teslas on other chargers as well. The Teslas don't only work on the Tesla charger. However, you can't charge other cars on the Tesla charger.
Is that right?
Yeah. The Tesla chargers are much higher powered than the majority of the other people, the other companies. They'll do, I think, 120, so they're more than twice what I can use. The Ecotricity was the company that had the monopoly at the motorway services. You could only find Ecotricity or Tesla there. Now it's starting to get opened up to other companies like Ionity, who, although my car won't work on their chargers, there are two different main charging standards, and my car only has one of them. They are faster, and it does mean that the people who have the other charging type are probably all going to go to the Ionity chargers, leaving the Ecotricity ones open for us with the slightly older chargers.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, at the moment, BP have bought ChargeMaster. So ChargeMaster is supposed to be the largest charging company in the UK, so they say. But they're only putting in about 2 superchargers every week, BP. So it'll take them over a decade just to sort of put superchargers on their own petrol stations. So there is a potential shortage for people who want to charge on the way to, somewhere distant.
I don't agree with that at all, actually. When I first got my car 2 years ago, there were, I think, 2 rapid chargers in High Wycombe. There are now 6, plus the additional destination chargers that arrive there as well. It's not just Bowler. You've got a multitude of companies out there all expanding. And you don't necessarily want those chargers to be at the forecourts. When you're off the motorway network, more often than not, you're going to be using slower chargers because you're not just fueling up and moving on. You're going to a place, plugging in, and then going off to do something else. So where you want them is in the car parks and park and rides and at your workplace and outside your home.
Okay, so people are asking, Gareth, what is your car?
I did answer. I saw that one pop up, actually. I did answer while I was talking. It's one of the earlier Nissan Leafs.
Okay, and what is the battery life expected for a Nissan Leaf? What's the range?
Actually, originally, people were very worried about this. And if you look at the earlier, for instance, Renault Zoes, they come with a battery lease. The car is much cheaper, but you have to pay £75 a month for the battery for the rest of its life. And the advantage there is if the battery fails, you can just swap it over. But that made sense when we didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
My car has done 142,000 miles, I think. It's actually an ex-taxi, and it's doing fantastically. The state of health of the battery is at about 80% at the moment, I think, and it's going strong. It's absolutely fine. So what they're expecting now is that Nissan have got a problem on their hands because those batteries are going to outlive the body of the car. And now they're going to have all these batteries that need to be repurposed, most likely for home energy storage, and go on to have a second life, but they need to process them all. And Nissan actually started to worry about the opposite than we sort of instinctively feel it should be.
So, I mean, what is, do they give you a guarantee on the battery? Is it so many years they guarantee it, or so many miles?
It varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. I know that Nissan's was a 100,000-mile warranty on it.
Okay.
I'm not sure about other manufacturers. I do believe that some of them, it was something like a 7-year warranty on it. I know that mine was a 4-year or 100,000 mile. And when I had my first problem with the car, it actually had just exceeded the mileage on that. So I ended up having to get creative with solving my problem.
So if you've got a Nissan Leaf, I mean, you can use it to power your house. I mean, you can charge it up using, say, solar panels during the day, and then you can run your house off the battery at night. Do you do that?
You would need to have a vehicle-to-grid charger for that, and that infrastructure isn't really in place yet. It can come, you know, it will happen, but it's early days for that. I have actually fitted a mains inverter to mine, so I can generate a limited amount of 240 my car.
Robin, can you take a couple of questions on bikes, please?
I'm going to do that, John. Yeah, I'm just trying to get through the cars first. We've got at least 15 minutes left. So we've only done 10 minutes on.
Andy's going to sleep.
I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm interested in the cars. My feeling about electric cars is all the manufacturers are making cars essentially the same as a petrol or diesel car, but electrifying it. And in order to lug all that weight around of that vehicle, they're putting these big, heavy batteries in it, making it expensive. And you're still ultimately ending up with 5-seater cars where for 90% of the time, there's only ever one person in it. So my feeling with electric cars is they should make them much smaller, much lighter. And you have, you know, an electric car for all of those sort of under 20-mile journeys that people are doing, 10, 15-mile journeys. And, you know, you can make it much smaller and just 2-seaters. And then therefore it would be a much more practical thing. And then you can still maybe just keep your normal larger car for those very occasional times where you do go on longer journeys and holidays and things like that. Because, you know, everybody's worrying about range anxiety, but how often do most people really do 200-300 miles in a car? Not very often at all. It's, you know, a few times a year at best. So I think the manufacturers are kind of looking at it a different way, and it's kind of business as usual, really, where people are still using cars, be them electric or diesel, for all these journeys that they should be either using their feet or a bicycle for. So, you know, I wonder whether we're going to see some more innovative designs rather than just the same car but electrifying it.
I agree with that entirely, actually. This is why I started off saying that electric cars are not the solution. If we carbon copy what we have now, but electrified, those vehicles exist, but it's a much more popular thing in China to have those sort of micro vehicles than it is here. The problem we've got is that we have this arms race that we have to have more mileage and more and more and more and more. And
if just big batteries, isn't it? Just bigger batteries, bigger, heavy batteries.
I do a 40-mile round trip every day. Why do I need to lug 500 miles of batteries around in order to do that journey. So what we need is a whole spectrum of cars to suit different people. Yes, if you are a salesman who's traveling the country, you're going to need that 500 mile battery.
So can I say that I've got a Tesla in March, just before lockdown, and I kept my RAV4 because I thought when I go down to Wales, they're not going to be able to charge the Tesla. So I've used the Tesla for commuting in and out of London. It's absolutely perfect for that. I've only used the other car twice, I think, which just goes to show that although you're anxious that you're not going to get around with an all-electric car, in fact, for most uses, they're perfectly sufficient, and you don't have to worry about range and things like that.
Actually, when I first got my car, I was completely sold, and I'd been following on forums for years beforehand. So there was no worrying about making that change. But even so, the day before I went to get it, there was this little voice in the back of my head. What if I've got it wrong? What if it doesn't work for me and then I'm committed? So even being completely sold on it, there's still this little bit of anxiety before you've got there and done it. And there was no real issues. It turned out it was a bit of a culture shock for me, even having done all my research, so there's still a lot to learn. But having done it, there was no looking back. You know, I couldn't go back now. I couldn't afford to go back now. It cost me too much.
Thank you, Gareth. Now we'd better get on to bikes because otherwise John's going to fall asleep. So there's a few questions on the chat. E-bikes, I mean, do they warn you if the battery's going to peg out? And how easy are they to cycle back if it does peg out?
Yeah, I mean, you have a little console on the front of the bike that tells you how much battery life you've got left, how many miles, depending on the style of riding you're doing. So there's a sort of mathematical calculation that goes on, and it tries to constantly work out, is this person using loads of power and doing lots of hills? And it will give you exactly how many miles you've got left. And then they also tell you things like average speed, maximum speed, all the other things that you want to do. And if it did run out of battery, then it's just a heavier bike that you're riding back, essentially, so it'll still ride it. So a lot of people who want to get exercise, there's various settings on the bike. So you can have maybe one of 5 settings between very little assistance to lots of assistance, and you set that assistance depending on your terrain and you know how much exercise you want to get. So if you run it on eco, for instance, you are really, with that, all you're doing is you're compensating for having a slightly heavier bike, and you'd be riding a normal bike. So you have as much exercise as you want and as much assistance as you want.
And then charging batteries, Andy, I mean, yeah. Presumably you're using the 3 kilowatt charger, are you?
Yeah, no, it's just a normal plug, and essentially they are just sort of larger mobile phone batteries, really. So you plug it in, and classically from very low to full charge, maybe 5 hours, 5-6 hours, that sort of thing. But the thing to do is you just sort of, you know, when it gets to half empty, you maybe top it up from there. You can buy fast chargers to do it in an hour, but really you just, again, like you do with the car, you plug it in overnight and then it turns off like you do with your mobile phone.
You make folding e-bikes, do you? For people?
Yeah, we sell folding e-bikes. So we've just taken on a brand that does folding e-bikes. There's a lot of pretty poor folding e-bikes, but the one that we've got there is a nice design, and yeah, it's a big growth area for us. So they're going well already. Yeah.
Is it heavy? I mean, for a sort of.
I mean, all electric bikes are heavy, but for instance, the folding bike that we showed you the graphic of is about 17 kilograms.
Okay.
But you don't lift it very often. So when you want to transport it, for instance, you're going on a train, you fold it and then you wheel it along. Essentially, and the only time you'd lift it is to lift it on and off to the train. So you don't carry it around like a baby. So it's not terribly relevant.
And then we've got a question here, which I don't quite understand, but maybe you do. Can an electric motor be fitted to an e-bike?
You mean a retro motor be fitted to an e-bike? Yes, it can be.
I suppose. Can you retrofit?
No, there are various adaptations that you can get, which is mainly replacing your wheel with a hub-driven motor and then kind of strapping a battery on and a console onto it. I mean, it's a bit rough around the edges, but they do work. But it's not a very good ride quality, but it can certainly be done. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just mention at this stage, if anybody is thinking of changing their electricity supplier, and if they change over to Octopus Energy, and if you tell Octopus Energy that Marlow Energy Group recommended Octopus Energy, they will pay us 50 quid. So that's a good way of supporting Marlow Energy Group without having to actually make a donation. So I just thought I'd put that in here. Okay. Now, what questions have I missed? Has anyone got something they want to ask verbally?
There was one good question I saw come up that hasn't been mentioned yet, which was how many charging apps have I got on my phone?
Oh, right, okay.
Now, I counted, there are, I think, 52 different companies, all of which you need an app or an account or a key fob or a card. Personally, I've only got 3 on there because I tend to just stick to chargers, and that's all I need in this area. A lot of them, though, are moving towards contactless payment slowly but surely. Polar are one of those companies that are doing that. BP ChargeMaster are retrofitting contact to their machine. So it won't be too long before you can get everywhere you need to go just with a contact.
Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask either of our 2 speakers?
I would like to ask a question about the how is a battery with a battery life of say 10 years, how does the range decline over that period?
Well, as I said, my battery is at about 80% now. It reads anywhere between 80 and 85 miles on a full charge at the moment. It would have been just over 100 miles new. And it will slowly decline. But it's going to have to decline a long way before it stops me getting anywhere. I'm finding a journey to Telford at the moment requires 1 additional charge from when I first bought the car, because it's just reached down just that little bit further. So it's now taking me a little longer than it used to get up there, but it's not an issue. It's not going to stop me for quite some time yet.
So if I got a second-hand car which had done about, and say a Nissan Leaf which had done about 25,000 miles, I shouldn't be worried about my battery in the near future.
They have a battery health indicator in them. If you look at the fuel gauge, there is a wide bar that tells you how much power is in the car, and next to it there is a thin bar. Both of them have 12 segments, and the thin bar tells you the health of the battery. So a brand new car will have 12 bars in it. Mine currently has 11. So if you get in a car and you find it's got 4 bars left, then you're not going to want to buy that car.
Right. Okay. And is there a lease? I noticed there was a lease. Did I hear that there was a lease scheme with Nissan batteries, or am I? Is that a figment of my imagination?
It's more common with the Renault Zoes.
Oh, okay.
But yes, there are some that have a battery lease option.
Can I just pick you up, Gareth, on what you said about EVs not being the answer? I mean, if your EV is charged by solar panels and you have a power pack as well, then you're getting free motoring basically.
Yeah.
And you're not emitting anything really. I mean, the cost is all up front. I mean, the carbon cost is in the manufacture of the vehicle, which, any car that's manufactured produces 29 tons of waste, which has to be disposed of. So that's where the carbon emissions come. But if you accept that people need cars, then, I mean, it's still the best solution available.
On its own, it's not the solution. It's part of the solution. But there are also, the problem is we've been spoiled, haven't we? We've grown up a number of generations with the idea that we can all have this on-demand piece of luxury that will take us anywhere we want to go. We don't need it. Some of us need it. We don't all need it. And there are other ways. So it's going to be one piece of a very big puzzle.
No, I agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I'm not disputing that. The other thing you mentioned was tar particulates, and I mean, they are theoretically a risk. They do contribute to particulate levels, but they're not really probably not as dangerous as exhaust particulates.
One of the things that I do say when I'm talking about this with people is your car, assuming the person has an internal combustion engine car, has a certain figure as to how polluting it is, and that figure is only going to go up our ages. Mine is going to go down as the mix of power on the grid becomes greener. So if you replace all cars with electric cars, that fleet will get better with age from a pollution point of view.
Yeah, I agree.
They are flexible in a way that internal combustion engine cars aren't.
Well, that was really most illuminating. Thank you to both our speakers, to Gareth and Andy, for keeping us very well informed on what the possibilities are. And I think I'll certainly be visiting Andy's shop in the near future to test drive one of his bikes and see if it'll get me up the hill to Freeth Road.
No problem.
Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.